everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Bites. I'm so happy that you are able to join us today. My name is Kirsten Stoner. I'm a product strategy technologist at Veeam Software, and today we are joined by our friends from ExaGrid. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kirsten. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. I know Veeam and ExaGrid have a long history of partnership throughout the years. For those of you who are not familiar with Tom, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell them what your role is at ExaGrid?
Sure. Been with ExaGrid for a little while and have two roles, one within our engineering organization, responsible for interoperability between the ExaGrid solution and the various backup applications and partners like Veeam, and then also have a role within product management at ExaGrid.
That sounds awesome. It also sounds like it's some tough work you might have there on your hands, Tom. Uh,
I won't say no, but it's been a blast. It's a great product, and I look forward to talking a little bit about that today.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have a really exciting topic for you today. We're going to be talking about S3 object storage and security and how it's joining the Veeam ExaGrid integration. So let's get started. And just to set the stage, I did pull some data points from the Data Protection Trends Report. So if we take a look at this graph here, we can see that organizations across the board are still experiencing outages, but more than ever before, they're experiencing cybersecurity outages. No longer are we just preparing for weather, hardware, or software failures. We need to plan for that cybersecurity attack as well. And it's important to note that this is the fourth year in a row that this has been one of the most common and also the most impactful outages an organization can experience. To take this even further, the Data Protection Trends Report evaluated how many ransomware attacks an organization experienced. While some organizations said none, many who were hit once were also hit multiple times. So if we take a look at this, really the key takeaway here is that with ransomware, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. So we want to think about what security strategies are we putting into place that can help us tomorrow? Are we innovating or enhancing our strategies when that breach happens? Are we learning from our experiencing and trying to, stay more secure, implementing more best practices into our data centers? And more importantly, how can we recover from a ransomware attack? Well, the best way to recover is to really go to our backups, right? But the data is also showing us that these threat actors are targeting our backup repositories. Threat actors want us to pay that ransom. So they're going to go after that backup storage so that we have to pay them and we can't restore. So what we really need to start thinking about is how we can make sure we're implementing the proper security settings on our backup storage. Are we configuring immutability? Are we setting up air-gapped copies, setting up an offline copy of data, or even just having multiple copies of data is very important for every organization to be able to have a clean copy to recover from. And that's really where Veeam and ExaGrid can work together to make sure that your backups are secure and ensure workload availability. And it does this through fast restores, shorter backup windows, and ransomware protection. And I know Tom's going to talk a little bit more about this throughout our presentation, but when we think about fast restores, we're thinking about leveraging Veeam's fast clone and ExaGrid's landing zone to ensure those fast restores. Using ExaGrid's focus on their architecture, tiered storage, and deduplication to get shorter backup windows, faster restores, and backup efficiency. And when we think about ransomware protection, really working together with both solutions to secure backups, using object lock, enabling immutability, and also being able to perform those antivirus scans on that data in real time to make sure we're not restoring any corrupted data back into the environment are all ways we can work together to secure our environment. Not only that, but Veeam and ExaGrid have had a long history of partnership with over 10 years working together, setting up backup infrastructures together, and really providing our customers a best-in-class solution for backup and also their backup storage. Tom, is there anything else you would like to add to the slide before we talk a little bit more about ExaGrid's solution?
No, thanks, Kirsten. Shout out to the Veeam, research guys, Dave Russell, Jason Buffington. Did you know that Dave Russell and our ExaGrid CEO, Bill Andrews, are both musicians, and maybe we can get them to do some jamming at an upcoming VeeamON. What do you think?
That would be awesome. I actually would love to see the jam session that we could get out of those two.
All
So
right,
yeah,
so go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, yeah, let's talk about, the best of both worlds. Let's talk about some ExaGrid.
Great. Well, thanks again. Veeam users have lots of choices for their backup target storage. It's great that Veeam has such a broad set of partnerships with all sorts of different target storage. ExaGrid is focusing their tiered backup storage on customers that have about 50 terabytes or more, typically way more of total backup data. And as this slide illustrates, we can scale all the way up to 6 petabytes today with the current models. And while the other backup storage targets that Veeam offers have lots of pros, but also cons beyond just the cost of the solution, ExaGrid is really bringing all of the pros together in a architecture that we call tiered backup storage. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, particularly the benefits together with Veeam. And we bring that all at a very attractive price point. So reading from left to right, I want to start with the ExaGrid landing zone. Some folks may be familiar with this, but this is one of the key elements of our architecture. It's a high-speed disk cache where backups land and are also restored from. It's virtually the same as any other straight disk or SAN storage or anything else that you would have on premise, and we all know the benefits associated with that in terms of performance. But then to that, we add a repository tier into which we do the data deduplication, which brings you the long-term retention at a very cost-effective price point and other benefits. We do replication between ExaGrid locations that are in your data centers, where we send just the things that have changed in the repository tiers for very efficient WAN replication, etc. In the middle is a number of ExaGrid. So each of those would be a separate ExaGrid appliance. We have a variety of ExaGrid appliance models, and they differ primarily in their capacity. Each one, however, is coming with not only the storage capacity to do the landing zone and the repository tier, but each one comes with a full set of CPU, memory, and network resources in order to do the computationally intensive job and workload of deduplication. So we scale out where as you grow, when you grow, you just simply click in another ExaGrid appliance, sort of like Lego building blocks, coupled with Veeam's Sober, which we'll talk about in a few more slides as well. It really gives you a true end-to-end scale-out solution. Veeam does a great job of tackling scale-out. You probably are familiar with that. Now you're getting that in your backup target storage. And together, it's a really good solution, and we'll continue to highlight some of the integrations here today. We also don't end of life any of those appliances, and so you get to choose when you move. We don't force you to do that. And you can see the set of pros associated with that complete ExaGrid solution. So moving on next to a set of integrations. What do we have between Veeam and ExaGrid? This, as Kirsten mentioned, is a long history of integrations. We're actually one of the first vendors to support the Veeam Data Mover, and that's widely deployed today. So we'll sort of go around the circle real quick here. It starts with deduplication, where ExaGrid is able to have Veeam turn on not only deduplication, Veeam's deduplication, but also Veeam's, quote, dedupe-friendly compression. That reduces the amount of data that Veeam has to send to the ExaGrid, which always speeds up your backups. But then ExaGrid is able to further duplicate the data, taking your data reduction due to deduplication from Veeam's typical around 2 to 1 all the way up to around 14 to 1. So if you have a need for long-term retention, you're able to do that with the ExaGrid solution at a very economic and competitive price point. Sort of moving around the circle, we have the Veeam Data Mover, which is faster, optimized for backup transport, thanks to the great engineering work done by Veeam. The protocol is private. It's a Veeam-only protocol, and so it's less of a attack surface for bad things happening. Veeam further through the data mover is able to do synthetic fulls. It's reducing the amount of data that you have to move back and forth in order to get this synthesized full backup that's in the ExaGrid appliance. It's 30 times faster with Veeam's fast clone ability, and ExaGrid has integrated with that. We take it a bit further, not only allowing fast clone operations for literally faster backups, synthetic backups, but we also then turn around and under the covers resynthesize that backup so that literally in that landing zone, in that high-speed disk cache is essentially a real full, almost like you had done an active full backup. The benefit to that is what you need to restore from it with the fastest restores, fastest VM boots, all the vPower operations. All of this has been integrated through Sober, again, an end-to-end scale-out sort of a solution. And so we're here today to talk about a new spoke on that wheel, number 7, which is support for S3 targeted backups out of Veeam Backup and Replication, and then also S3 direct backups from Veeam's backup for Microsoft 365 into the ExaGrid. ExaGrid will offer a full on-premise S3 compatible object store integrated with Veeam for the purposes of backups and in both of those backup applications. And we'll talk a little bit about that more. So I think we can move on to the next slide where we'll actually drill into that sort of data flow possibilities with both Veeam and ExaGrid. There's a lot on this slide, but let's start in the very center where we've got the pleasant green Veeam M365 and backup and replication. These are on-premise installations, deployments of the Veeam products that you're familiar with. And I'll start with a data flow associated with your what we called here on-premise data. So these are your VMs. These are your application backups. These are all the things that Veeam Backup and Replication supports, and you know how long a list that is. All of that currently today can go through the Veeam Data Mover into the ExaGrid with all the benefits we talked about in terms of scalability and high-speed backups and restores, etc., and the security implications as well, and fast cloning, all that sort of stuff. You're also able to use S3 for those backups. There may be cases where you want some of the object locking associated with the S3 capabilities, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But think the majority of your on-premise data is probably going to continue going through the Veeam Data Mover. Variety of reasons for that. We have thousands of customers literally using the Veeam Data Mover today very successfully, and that's going to continue to be a strong option for you going forward. However, we're adding to that the S3 capability, and one of the primary benefits associated with that is the ability to do Veeam's backup for Microsoft 365, M365, direct to ExaGrid's S3 object. This would be an on-premise backup, so everything we're talking and looking at here would be on-premise. The ExaGrid is on-premise. Your Veeam M365 deployment is on-premise, but together they are working to give you retention of your M365 valuable data onto an on-premise site. Plus, you can really add much longer retention for the Microsoft data, generally longer and at much better cost points than what Microsoft tends to offer in terms of its own settings for deleted emails and retained file versions and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really nice solution for those folks that recognize the vulnerabilities associated with Microsoft data and getting that, and the benefits of getting that on-premise and keeping longer term retentions, again, because of the ExaGrid deduplication at a very effective cost reduction. Sort of zooming out a little bit, you can also, of course, run Veeam up in the cloud, whatever cloud, wherever Veeam goes. Great story around what Veeam can do there. In those cases, you can go from that Veeam through the S3 protocol into the on-premise ExaGrid. So you've got a lot of different solutions here in this new capability that we're offering. So it's a best combination Veeam data mover for a lot of things, and then S3 into the ExaGrid for a lot of things as well.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome and pretty exciting as well. I mean, a lot of organizations today are running that hybrid environment. Some parts of their some workloads are in the cloud, some workloads are on premises. So it's really good that you guys are able to support both within your solution. But when we think about this too, how do we make sure that we're keeping this secure? Do you guys have a strategy for that, Tom?
We do. If you could jump on to the next slide there. Security is really important. We all know that. And Kirsten, you did a great job of highlighting some of the reasons why it's so darn important. And y'all are living it. We have a number of security features within the product, but I'm going to highlight just a few. We can always talk more in depth through further follow-up conversations with ExaGrid folks, solution folks around what any of these options would mean for you as you bring secure solutions into your environment. The first thing I'm going to talk specifically about, though, is in the upper right-hand corner, the ransomware recovery, that little clock icon. It is truly ransomware recovery because ExaGrid provides what we call a tiered air gap. We have a non-network facing tier, namely that repository tier that we looked at before. And I have another slide that drills into this. Because that's non-network facing, nobody on the planet can get at it. It's completely protected by the ExaGrid environment. At any point in time, we are delaying the deletes that are coming in from the backup application that are normal, expected due to retention. Because obviously Veeam has to clean up older backups that you've said you don't want anymore, otherwise you'd fill up. Well, how do you know that that's a good expected delete from a malicious delete? Generally, you can't know, and that's the when, not if sort of thing. We delay those deletes, and we hang on to that for a configurable period of time, typically 10 days. As a result, at any point, you can go back and retrieve those previous backups. Again, we'll have another slide associated with that. So that is one flavor of immutability, because once that backup data lands on the ExaGrid and is in that repository tier, it is completely unchangeable. No one can get at it. No one can delete it. No one can encrypt it, etc. The other thing that I want to highlight real quickly is at the very top, we have a security checklist in our GUI. It encapsulates all of these things with a series of red-green icons that basically give you at a glance assessment of how are you doing against our recommended set of security best practices. For the ones that are red, you simply click on them. It takes you to the page where you can then go on and configure those options. Highlighting also bottom right with our two-factor authentication. I cannot tell you and stress how important this is. We have many stories of customers that turned on 2FA, and then shortly after that, they were actually attacked by ransomware. And the fact that the security officer that I'll talk about and the two-factor authentication literally saved their environment from a destructive operation. We also have encryption at rest down at the drive level. So bunch of security features overall aimed at protecting you within the environment. So drilling into that ExaGrid retention time lock, RTL. How does this actually work? The first thing is the thing that you can see sort of in the center. There's an ExaGrid with those two tiers, that tiered backup storage that we talked about. That repository, I know it's a little small, is non-network facing. You cannot get to it except through the ExaGrid software. And as a result, not only does it keep the long-term retention and is used for replication and the deduplicated data and cost effectively keeping the long-term retention, but it's ready for this ransomware recovery. It contains a set of immutable objects. We use basically an object file system inside the ExaGrid repository that has all the properties of immutable objects, which is why we call it immutability and a tiered air gap. We delay the deletes associated with any activity coming in from the backup application, malicious or not. And then at any point in time, you can do a point in time recovery. It's a simple management sort of operation that tells the ExaGrid, look, I want you to present the data as it was 1 hour ago, 6 hours ago, 8 hours ago. And that's not just your most recent backups that are coming back as they were for that point in time. That's literally your entire set of retention. So your backups that are 6 months old, they're coming back up. They're coming back available to Veeam as they were last night or yesterday or whatever. And so by doing that point in time recovery and then jumping into Veeam and doing all of the standard Veeam recovery operations, vPower operations, full VM restores, whatever, you're literally able to recover from any ransomware attack by doing this point in time recovery. We have a whole bunch of customers that have successfully done this. And I'm not just bragging when I say they really sing the praises of what ExaGrid has brought to their ability to recover from that horrible ransomware activity by doing a point-in-time recovery and using the ExaGrid retention time lock. So the next slide just goes into that just a little bit more in detail. We're assuming that ransomware, malware has encrypted the primary data. It's looking and searching for the backup repositories, as Kirsten highlighted in the earlier slides, and it finds them and just deletes them however it can by taking over the app, whatever. In the ExaGrid, that landing zone copy is actually deleted. We lie to the ransomware and tell it, oh yeah, we deleted it. But in fact, the delete has been delayed by our ExaGrid software, and the repository tier contains the delayed deletion version of that. And then you go through that point in time recovery and you bring it back. Now with the S3 object interface, we're also supporting object locking with backups that are coming in through that S3 interface, courtesy of the Veeam immutability capabilities. And that further protects your backups that are sitting there in the landing zone. So if you have a need for the absolute most shortest recovery point objectives, you're able to combine the two, where Veeam-based S3 object locking is protecting your absolute very most recent backups on the landing zone, and your repository tier within ExaGrid's retention time lock is protecting even your older backups that you may have even kept longer than the Veeam immutability settings are for. So it's a really nice combination of security, harder to defeat over time, that sort of keeping one step ahead of the bad guys, giving you all some options for how you want to utilize these, what you can tell your CISO that you're able to do, etc.
Wow, that's awesome. We did get some questions that came in for you, Tom. I hope you're ready to answer them.
I'm ready.
So the first question that I have here is, what kind of performance can I expect with ExaGrid's S3 object target option?
Great question. So as we've always done with Veeam, we've optimized our integration with Veeam, not only in terms of some of the features and functions we went over today, but also in terms of performance. And the data mover is always going to be your best performing interface between Veeam and ExaGrid. That's partially because Veeam has optimized the data mover traffic and data mover protocol for streaming large backup files. So there's going to be a lot of cases where the Veeam data mover is the recommended best for performance. In some cases, you now have an option, obviously, for an S3 interface into the ExaGrid. You would need to utilize that for Veeam's backup of Microsoft Office 365 stuff and some other things as well. The performance that you can expect out of that is enterprise class performance. We have worked closely with Veeam. Our S3 implementation will be Veeam Ready Object. We utilize the Veeam SOS API, all of those sort of things that ensure performance and the kind of integration that you all have come to expect between Veeam and ExaGrid. So Data mover is going to be best, but S3 is an absolutely viable option and something that you can explore more with the ExaGrid and also the Veeam systems engineers and solution architects. And ExaGrid loves to do proof of concepts. We can get you boxes in a matter of days, and you can test it out for yourself. So you can use some data mover backups, you can do some S3 backups, and you can get some real data to help you make the best decision possible.
Yeah, I love being able to, test things out and see how they work. That's one of the things I always like to do, especially when it comes to installing, setting up backup jobs, seeing how the technology works. So that's great to hear.
Well,
Think,
Rick has a bunch of ExaGrids. He does share those with you, doesn't he?
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
okay, okay.
I've been using ExaGrid since I started here at Veeam, which was, I think, it's hard to remember because I'm getting older now. um, but that was like I think 2014, and so even back then I was like I love the ExaGrid, and Rick probably does remember that too. So I'm always happy to use that storage. And so, but talking about the Veeam data mover, I know you mentioned that. So how much of an impact does the ExaGrid Veeam data mover plus the ExaGrid's retention time lock have in terms of security? Is there anything extra they need to implement, or does it keep it more secure, or what kind of advice do you have for them there, Tom?
Great question. So there's nothing you have to do on the Veeam side in order to get ExaGrid's retention time lock, that ability to recover from a ransomware attack. It comes from the factory with ransomware recovery retention time lock turned on, set at 10 days. We find that's a pretty sweet number for most people. It only takes about 6% or so of additional storage capacity on the ExaGrids. And that's actually a great deal because many other solutions that bring retention time lock or the equivalent requires literally a whole second copy of your backup and your backup data. So ours is very efficient and cost effective at taking, again, 6 to 10% additional in order to give you that 10 days of 100% full recoverability after a ransomware attack.
So if customers don't want to do 10 days, they could probably do less than that, right? Is that safe to say, or?
Sure. Some customers, have things really well in control, and they figure, yeah, we're going to know when this thing happens, like within 24 hours. So sure, you can shorten your retention time lock to save a little bit of story. It can go all the way up to 30 days.
Okay.
We figure if folks aren't able to detect a ransomware attack that has done damage to your backup repositories, if you can't detect that within 30 days, there's sort of bigger problems. So you have a nice set of slider there between the time that you have to actually detect, push the panic button on the ExaGrid to stop all further deletes from happening versus that little bit of extra ExaGrid capacity consumption.
Okay. Good to know. I mean, yeah, you never know, what type of designs customers have or what their retention wants to be. So it's nice that it's flexible and they can choose kind of what they want to do there. I know you talked about, S3 for M365 data and utilizing ExaGrid's S3 object store. So this question is for that topic. So should they use Veeam to write to ExaGrid as an S3 object store if ExaGrid already has a tiered gap and uses immutable data objects, or should they use the Veeam data mover for all data in S3 for M365?
Wow. So if you're going to do M365, you have to use S3 to the ExaGrid. M365 will only support S3 storage for the, object direct. There's no data mover path from the M365 into the ExaGrid. So for M365, it's sort of an easy answer. You go straight to S3. At that point, you can utilize Veeam's key immutability and object locking capabilities because ExaGrid's S3 implementation does support the object locking, and Veeam Ready confirms that, etc. So you can do that to get an additional level of deletion protection by backups in the landing zone being protected through Veeam's immutability. If the settings associated with that and the ability to recover and do your M365 restores, either probably single items, single mailboxes, single OneDrive files, etc., can happen through the ExaGrid point-in-time recovery, then you don't need the Veeam object locking, although it's very much a belt and suspenders sort of thing where having more options, understanding what that means, being able to select what's appropriate and best for your environment and also what your bosses want is a really good thing. And we think giving you those additional options between both Veeam being aware of what it takes, what immutability can bring, the value of immutability can bring to backups, and ExaGrid's delayed delete through retention time lock. We think the two together gives you lots of options and choices.
Yeah, because you can set the immutability that if something happens, you still have that 10 days to get that data back. So that seems like a tried and true solution. So I do think that we might be coming up on time here. So I know we have one more slide. So Veeam and ExaGrid, better together. We have a history of integrated products. We love to work together. I love to use the ExaGrid. Tom loves to use the ExaGrid. We both love Veeam too. So if you need to know a little bit more information about, ExaGrid, or even want more resources, feel free to check out their website at www.exagrid.com. And a real question that I have here is, Veeamon's coming up. So Tom, are you going to be at the event?
Sure will, Kirsten. How about you?
Oh, I won't be there this year, a sore subject for me. I have a wedding same week, and I'm in the wedding, so I will not be at Veeam destination wedding. So while you guys are off working hard, I will be, relaxing at a wedding, which also is hard work. Don't you agree?
I do agree. And, I'll be there in the ExaGrid booth. Come check out I don't know what the tchotchkes are for this year, but they're going to be awesome. So looking forward to seeing everyone there.
Awesome. And if you guys haven't registered for Veeam yet, be sure to check out veeamon.com and register at our website. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining me today.
Thank you, Kirsten. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you.